Hi, I'm Jane Farnham from Great British Speakers, and I'm here today chatting to one of our greats, Professor Chris Roebuck. Chris, thanks for joining us today.
Pleasure.
Lovely to see you. Now, over your career, you've quite a varied career, to be honest. You've been in the military, you've worked within London Underground, international banking, professional services, the National Health Service, and you've also worked with SMEs and entrepreneurs. And that makes for quite a unique combination of experience, one would say. So what did you learn on that journey about organisational success and leadership?
Well, it was a journey of discovery, which got me to about 15 years ago, a sudden revelation. Because like everybody else, I was, for example, in the army, and I saw what delivered great leadership in the military, which is obviously really good leadership. But then I went into work with SMEs, I went into London Underground, and I thought, oh, that's what delivers great leadership in London Underground. And then on into HSBC, Global Head of Leadership at UBS, where we develop leaders, and saw, oh, that's what delivers great leadership here. Then into NHS. And by the end of that journey, I suddenly thought, well, hang on, everyone's saying, oh, we're different. We do things differently in this industry. And I'm thinking, that's not true. If I look over my entire journey, what delivers success is actually constant, irrespective of what job you're in, for 90% of it. And I suddenly thought, well, this is about not what job you do, not what company you're in. It's about the fact that we're all human beings.
Yes. Good point, well made. So when we've spoken in the past, you've commented in, how some people try to make leadership more complex than it actually is and actually needs to be, which makes life really difficult for people who want to become leaders. So is it possible to make leadership really simple?
Yeah, I think the problem is that organizations either don't explain leadership clearly and simply to people, or what happens is they just don't explain it at all, and everyone has to sort of ad-lib it as they go along. And trial and error is never really a very effective way of doing things. So on that journey, the conclusion I came to in all of those organizations is actually, and this was epitomized by UBS, because when UBS was created, we had to develop senior leaders, and we wanted to make it as simple as possible. So everybody got the message and could not possibly forget it. And there were just three things that need to happen. One, a good foundation of task management skills. Two, the ability to get the best from everybody. Three, the ability to focus that best on what the organization needs to do to be successful. And it is really that simple. If leaders do those things, able to manage the task, able to inspire people, able to focus that effort onto strategic objectives, you will be successful. And that's not complicated, because also my experience was, after that, having done a part-time neuroscience course, that is actually embedded in our brains. That's the way our brains work. And if you think about how you get the best from people, it's not that we don't know. It's not that we have to be told by somebody. It's because we already know it from our own experience. And all I do is help people realize that, hidden within their experience, which is like a 1,000-piece jigsaw thrown across a table, my job is to help them find the edges, and then find the sky, then find the land. And suddenly the jigsaw becomes a picture. And they realize that in their experience is the ability to do those three things. And then they can just go and do it.
Okay, so that does sound quite straightforward, which is great from a leadership perspective. How do you think things have changed around that, what with COVID, and what are the imperatives for organisations post-COVID? Because hopefully we will be post-COVID soon.
Okay, so what organisations needed to do before COVID is very much what they need to do after COVID. It's the same thing. So it's effectively have a foundation of capability. It's beat your objectives, or achieve, if not beat your objectives. Deal with any challenges that come up, like, do we need to improve customer service? Do we need to improve risk management, employee engagement? which is your challenges, and then it's about building the future, because you can't be static. Now, that's what organizations had to do before COVID. The challenge is that everybody who's listening to this has changed their perspectives of what is important over COVID. We've been locked down, we've potentially been ill, some of us have potentially lost friends or family. So there's been a fundamental reassessment of what is important to our lives, particularly around the balance between what is important at home and what is important at work. All the research, all the experience, and not just that, everything everybody who's listening to this knows is that what is more important to many of us now is our personal lives versus our work lives. So the situation has changed in that pre-COVID, we were prepared to put up with work impinging on our personal lives. We were prepared to put up with leaders who we didn't really like, but we didn't want to leave the job because it was all too much grief and we needed the money, blah, 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 blah. COVID has made us rethink that. And that is what's going on now, because now we've gone back. People are not prepared to put up with second-rate leadership. They are not prepared to have their personal lives significantly impinged on by their work lives. And that is the challenge. So organizations still have to have their foundations, still deliver their objectives, still beat their challenges, and still build the future, but do so in a way that allows an employee to say, actually, I still love my job.
Yeah, I think it's certainly put the cat amongst the pigeons in terms of perspective, isn't it? And, you know, like we now sort of think there's a work-life balance. We appreciate that a little bit more. And we don't want our work to define us necessarily. So I think it's really important for leaders to respect that in moving forward post-COVID. So tell me what your thoughts are, because I know you talk about the Great Resignation. Can you explain what that is and tell me how that plays into all of this? Yeah,
you see, the Great Resignation is about that change in perspective. Because everyone says it's the Great Resignation, but it's not just the Great Resignation. It's the great, having thought about it, I'm not even going back, which is what's happened. I mean, the people who resigned actually went back and gave the organisation a second chance. A fair number of people worked out that it wasn't even worth going back. Then it's also, it's not just the resignation bit, which implies perhaps there is some fault with the person who leaves. It's the great, I want to get more out of my job. It's the great, I want to be shown respect. It's the great, I want to have balance between my personal life and my work life. Now, then that's the perspective change, but also the market and facilitation change is that people can achieve that more easily. You can go onto your laptop now, and if you or I said, don't want to live in UK anymore, are there any jobs in New York that might work? Straight into the internet. So it's that ability to change your job so easily that has facilitated this as well. And it's also the fact that COVID has made employers realize that for a fair number of jobs, not all by any means, because some jobs you have to be there to do it, but for a fair number of jobs, you don't have to go into the office. You can work remotely. So all of those factors together have meant that the ability of the individual to say, no, enough is enough. I've done the cost benefit around this job, and the quality of work I'm doing, the aggravation I'm getting from my boss, the quality of the organization means that I now view the cost benefit of this job versus the pay, and the benefit I get is negative, therefore I am off. The challenge for organizations is to keep that cost benefit positive, and it's really down to getting leaders to create an environment where people want to stay, as I said. And that's about, being a task leader to get things done, to build the foundation. It's about being an inspirational leader to get the best from people so that they give all of their effort, not hold back. It's about being an entrepreneurial leader to develop innovation, disruptive thinking, find opportunity. And it's being about a transformational leader to build the future, to grow diversity, to attract talent. if people can do that, the powerful thing is, if an organization's leaders can do that, it reverses the Great Resignation, because the people in the organization are so inspired and love it. If you need more people, they'll go and find their friends.
Yeah, it's about feeling inspired and valued, isn't it, as well? So, Chris, if you look back at the hundreds of organisations and thousands of leaders that you've helped across the world in the 10 years that you've been speaking, what are the ones you most recall, and for what reason?
Okay, most bizarre, just before Christmas, I was supposed to be doing an award ceremony, 20-minute intro, open some envelopes, award, do the awards, riverboat on the River Thames for a professional body, gliding down the Thames. Anyway, as you know, before Christmas, new variant appears. And at a week's notice, we're suddenly remote. So rather than being on a riverboat in the Thames, I'm in my studio at home, in a dinner jacket, in front of the camera, opening cold envelopes, saying, and the winner is, and then pressing the button on my phone for canned applause.
No, I want one of those buttons. I think you should take it everywhere you go.
It was completely surreal. Okay, one that made the most impact, Myanmar. This was a pro bono at the request of the Red Cross in London. And I was doing a gig in Malaysia, so I flew up there. Myanmar Red Cross Executive Committee in Rangoon, little room in their office by the docks there, hot, fans in the ceiling, small group of about 10, 15 people, introduced by the president of their Red Cross, plastic chairs, and I just remember the introduction of the title. It was Doing More with Less for Those in Need. And in a country with no healthcare, virtually no hospitals, dengue fever, malaria, rabies, that organization was just doing so much for the people. And I spent a week with them, and I learned more about humility in that 1 week myself than I think I taught them about leadership. And going to their emergency warehouse with disaster aid packs ready to go, food packs, it was just mind-blowing. I'll never, ever forget that. Then the most nuts in terms of how I managed to get through it, Abu Dhabi, two big banks being merged, really important event. Signing of articles of memorandum, big hotel, 5-star hotel, big stage, government ministers, massive screen, massive television screen at the back that did all the sort of big special videos, etc. Literally 5 meters high, 10 meters long. I had no idea how much power it was using, but I soon found out. So my brief was to talk about how you in the audience can work together to create this new bank for Abu Dhabi. I get 10 minutes into my keynote, and there's this buzzing sound behind me, and suddenly there's a dirty great bang, and I turn around and the entire screen has gone completely blank. So I'm thinking, oh, okay, so I ad lib. Anyway, there's much rushing about, and 5 minutes later, it comes back on again. I start again. Then about 2 minutes later, it goes again. Bang! I'm trying to ad lib still. The audience is getting slightly nervous about what's going on. The HR director is freaking out completely. And I get a voice in my ear. Somebody comes and says, what we've discovered is they've plugged the screen into the wrong socket, and it's not powerful enough to take the screen. You just keep going and we'll try and sort it out. So I get the audience to do an exercise on how we are going to work together to build a positive culture for the new bank. And as I'm doing so, the electricians are running a cable about this big down the middle of the audience on a cable reel, past me, connecting it back into the screens. And then suddenly it all relights up again, and I'm able to deliver the rest of my keynote to thankfully rapturous applause. Absolutely nuts. Most challenging one, UK
Sounds like teamwork, though. Sounds like a bit of teamwork there.
I had to walk off the stage at one point and tell the HR director to calm down and not to think of stopping the event, because he was just freaking out. I said, don't worry, we'll keep it running. So the one that was most challenging was I was run up by the UK Defence Academy, which teaches senior military officers and civil servants about defence related and government related matters, and they said, can you come and do a short masterclass for a couple of hours on leadership integrity, not leadership, but what integrity within leadership means. And I said, yeah, okay, fine. Then they rang up 2 hours later and said, how about a whole day? And I went, okay, fine. And I didn't realize how challenging that was to talk about what leadership integrity means in different environments where military officers and civil servants may be. The ambassador in Tibet, does he pay a little bit of cash to the driver to get his oil before Christmas? And just simple things like that. So I did it, and it was really, really rewarding. But what was amazing was that 2 years later, without any prompting, I got an email from the Chief Weapons Officer of HMS Albion, which is the Royal Navy flagship, on an operational tour in the South China Sea with Chinese warships about and all the rest of it. And he said, Chris, I want to thank you for your inspiring masterclass at the Defence Academy, which I used to help me lead my high-performing team at sea. And he said, not only that, but I'm using what you said today to run a workshop for fellow officers and senior non-commissioned officers on leadership. We are across the other side of the world on a 10-month tour away from home, and leadership integrity could not be more important than where we are now. And I just thought that makes speaking worthwhile, that somebody with that much leadership experience in that senior a role can actually be teaching his colleagues some of the things I introduced him to was humbling, to say the least.
Yeah, 3 very different events there. Gosh, there's not one event or inquiry that comes through the same, and that just goes to prove it. So let's talk about your podcast, Chris, because you do a podcast called Perspectives from the Top. You interview successful leaders from around the world to gain their insights on how to deliver success. And you always finish up with the question, what are a couple of things that you would recommend leaders listening to make themselves, what would they use to make themselves more successful? So what do they generally say? Is there any set reply to that? And what would your answer to that question be?
The podcasts are just, one, so much fun, but so revealing. And for listeners here, it's www.perspectivesfromthetop.com. And I decided to interview a group of really successful but very, very diverse leaders to see what they say. So we've got Peter Maurer, President of the International Committee of the Red Cross, Stephen Green, ex-chairman of HSBC, Sylvia Asfedo, NASA scientist, top woman in tech, CEO US Girl Scouts, Andy Byford, Transport Commissioner for London. So, so there you've got tech, you've got the Red Cross, you've got London, Transport for London, you've got HSBC and a government trade minister, and there's more of them. The really powerful thing is that they all, through talking through their story, come up with the same things that they all did to deliver success through people. It's about having a clear focus on what needs to be done. It's creating a purpose. But above all, it's the things that are, not quantifiable. It's about building trust. It's about using empathy. And it's about building partnership. And I'll add another one, because Peter Maurer, president of the International Committee of the Red Cross, threw another one in a nonchalant comment where he said, yes, I was talking to the Pope last week, and the Pope gave me a good piece of advice, which is about the importance of going for a win-win. And I thought, yes, Peter, we all pop in to see the Pope for a little bit of advice now and again. But the point was that irrespective of how broad their experience is, totally different organizations, it's like my journey. There are fundamentally powerful things that all leaders do to get the best from people. And focus, purpose, trust, empathy, partnership, win-win, they're there.
Yeah. So leaders tend to have a lot of common traits.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But it goes back to that journey of mine. It goes back to what we all know from our own experience. It goes back to when I'm doing keynotes, because one of the things I ask during keynotes is I get the audience to talk to me about their best leader. And I flip chart it. And I've kept all of those over 10 years. And what is amazing is every time I go up on a stage, I know what the audience will say. And when they've given me their list, I then show them the list from the other 20,000 plus leaders that I've worked with. And it's the same list. And the powerful thing is, one, they know about it because they told me. Two, it doesn't cost any money. Three, they can do more of it tomorrow. And it is, that goes back to the point we started on, which is why leadership is so simple.
Okay, so final question then, very quickly. Are great leaders born, or can you become a great leader?
Now that was one I was not expecting. Okay.
Just thought I'd throw that in there.
But interesting. There's been this comment that leaders are born, etc., etc. Interesting. Of all people, Viscount Montgomery, the British war hero, said in 1948, there are principles of leadership just as there are principles of war, and these can be learnt. So, to your comment, right, yes, you can learn leadership, but the most important thing is that you learn to do task management first. Prioritization, time management, delegation, communication, giving feedback. That then gives you bandwidth to do the leadership. If you can do those things, you will be a competent leader if you show your people you care. Anybody can get to that level if they want to. But I believe that there are certain personality traits that help somebody move from being a competent leader to an absolutely inspirational great leader like Mandela or those others. And therefore, I think it's a mix of the two. So there is no argument that anybody can become a competent leader if they do the basics. But only a few people will ever reach the heights of leadership. And much of that is about personality.
Interesting. Well, Chris, it's been really lovely and a pleasure chatting to you today. Thank you so much. And if you'd like to book Chris, make a real impact at your event, then simply contact myself or Steve at Great British Speakers on 01753 439 289 or email bookings@greatbritishtalent.com.